Hi everyone, welcome back to MEG Motors. Today we're going to be working on this Echo backpack blower. This is a PB-265ln backpack blower. It came into the shop, the same person brought 4 different pieces of equipment that needed work, and this is just one of them. We don't know much about it, it doesn't run. I've looked it over a little bit. I can already see like the fuel line, one of the fuel lines is broken and disconnected, and the primer bulb has a big hole in it. So we know we have fuel problems, but before we spend a lot of time working on the fuel system, we want to make sure that it doesn't need anything else. It's actually missing the air filter cover. I've already looked that up and have those parts ready to order if we can make this one run. So we're going to run a quick test. We know we need 3 things to make an engine run. We need spark, and the spark has to occur at the right time. If it occurs too early or too late, the engine won't run. And we need compression. I pulled this one through and I can feel that it feels like it's got a lot of compression, so I don't think compression is an issue. And we need fuel. We know we have fuel troubles because of what we've already seen on this one. But so we're gonna run a quick test. We're gonna spray some carburetor cleaner in the carburetor and pull it through a few times and see if it will start. If it'll start, then we know that we have spark, our ignition system's okay, and it's sparking at the right time, and we have enough compression to run, and we can get started repairing the fuel system. This is the most common problem with these small yard appliances. So let's do that. We're gonna open the throttle wide open, and we're just gonna shoot a quick shot in here. And then I'm gonna pull it through a few times and we'll see if we can get it to start. Nothing so far. And I'm going to give it one more shot. There we go. That's what we were looking for. Just that little bit of a shot, a little bit of a startup right there. That confirms our compression. It won't do that if it doesn't have enough compression, and it confirms that we have spark, and it's occurring at approximately the right time at least. So we're going to go ahead then, and we're going to pull the carburetor off of this one. We're going to go through it, fix it up, and we know we're going to have to put some fuel lines on it. So yeah, let's get all that work done, and we'll see if we can make this one run. All right, so let's work on getting the carburetor off of this one. We got 2 Phillips screws here we're gonna take off, and we have to disconnect the throttle cable. This one has an interesting throttle cable. I'm gonna reset the camera a little bit and show you how this throttle cable is attached and what we have to do to get it disconnected. All right, so here's our throttle right here on this carburetor. And we have to disconnect this cable. Most of the time, or not most of the time I guess, but a lot of times the throttle cable have like a little J hook, a little S hook on it, and it just fits down into a hole in the linkage, and it's pretty easy to see and figure out how that disconnects. But this one is different. There's no hole there, and it might not be intuitive to everybody how you disconnect this one. So I'm going to open the throttle, full throttle, and then I'm going to hold it open with my finger while I return the throttle back towards idle. And as it comes back to idle, it'll try to push the cable out of this connector right there, just like that. I'm going to help it a little bit with this pick. A lot of times these will just come out by themselves. This one's just being a little difficult. So that's how that comes out right there. And it's important when you put this back together that this ring here be in the right orientation, because it's only big enough for the cable end on one side. And so if this is spinned 180 degrees the wrong direction, when you try to put the cable back on, this cable end won't be able to go down inside the connector there, and it won't work correctly. So anyway, that's how you get this cable disconnected. So let's move on with getting the carburetor off. All right, with the throttle cable disconnected and our fuel line, here's our broken fuel line. We actually have one fuel line broken and one fuel line missing. We're gonna take these two screws loose here. And see if we can get this carburetor off. All right, so with the screws loose, the throttle cable will just pull out of the bracket. And there we are, there's our carburetor. You can see the hole in the primer, I hope. Yeah, so I'm expecting this one to definitely need some work inside. So I'm gonna clean this carburetor up and we'll tear it apart and see what's going on inside. All right, so here's our carburetor. And I can already see we have a couple of issues with this one. I think somebody's probably been working on it. It is a Zama, which is good. And it is a diaphragm style carburetor, which is like a lot of the carburetors that we work on. So it's got a fuel pump. Normally this is situated on opposite sides, but on this one it's got a fuel pump right here and it's got a metering chamber right here. The difference is that this one, instead of having a standard butterfly in the venturi of the carburetor, like a flat blade that opens up to open the throttle, it has a barrel. So these are barrel style carburetors. And as you open the throttle, that barrel rotates. Hopefully you can see how that works. Opens to open the throat of the carburetor and allow the engine to run. And so the reason I say I think we already have problems is one of the things that's important with these barrel style carburetors is that when the barrel turns, it has to also rise up out of the body of the carburetor. That's how it controls the fuel. If you can see inside this carburetor, there's a rod inside there with a needle in it, and as the rod is pulled out of the tube in the barrel of the carburetor, it introduces more fuel to match the additional air that's introduced when we open the throttle. The problem is with this one, when the throttle turns, it's not rising up out of the barrel of the carburetor. That's why our throttle is hanging, because while the barrel should be up out of the body of the carburetor at this point, it's not. It's hitting this screw over here. And so there's a couple of different reasons that that can happen. And so we're gonna actually take the barrel out of the carburetor and take a look at it and see if we can see why that's not working like it should. So let's take a couple screws out. All right, then we're going to pull the barrel. Yep, that's as I suspected. All right, so here's our barrel out of the carburetor, and you can see that it's capable of moving in and out. And this is what it needs to do when it rotates. And the way that that works is, you can see on this barrel, there is a ramp right here. And that ramp sits on this pin right here inside the carburetor. Problem is there's supposed to be a little roller on this pin, and that roller is missing. And when that roller is missing, the ramp no longer contacts the pin. And so the barrel will not rise up out of the body of the carburetor like it needs to. And so this carburetor will never work without that part in there. And I don't know that that part's even available separately. So I'm going to look around. I've got some old carburetors laying around, and I'm going to see if I've got one maybe that has that roller on it that I can steal. And if I can, if I do, then we can attempt to save this carburetor. And if not, we're going to have to order a new carburetor. So give me a minute to dig through my junk, and let me see if I can find the part that we need. Okay, so our new carburetor's come in and it looks pretty close. The only difference really seems to be where the throttle cable attaches, where it comes into the carburetor. Now this one's got a little different setup than the original has, but we'll transfer that from the original over to this carburetor and then we'll get it put on. It's also interesting that on this one, a lot of times with these barrel style carburetors, and remember what we were talking about, how the barrel is supposed to rise up out of the carburetor? Hopefully you can see how this one does that. That's what was missing on the other carburetor. The other thing that's interesting on these barrel carburetors, it's hard to find the adjustments. It doesn't have the external screws like we see on some carburetors. The idle mixture screw is down inside that hole there, and the high-speed screw is over here. And a lot of times on the OEM carburetor, those will actually be sealed off with some sort of a plug, wax plug or a plastic plug. And so you have to do a little bit of work just to get access to the screws. But this one has come with the screws already exposed, so that's a good thing. It'll make it easier to tune this carburetor once we get it installed and get this blower running. So we're going to go ahead and take this carburetor back off. And then this is where we have our slight difference. As you can see, the new carburetor has a different system. So we're going to try to take this pipe off of this one and see if we can put it on this one. Now, this should just unscrew from here. And then this one should unscrew from here. I don't know if the nuts are going to be the right size, the same size, so we'll see if this one will screw into the nut that came with this carburetor. We may have to transfer the nut too. Yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to break the carburetor, I'm afraid, if that nut's not right. Let's just see. Yeah, that is not right. Hopefully we can get this nut to go in the new carburetor without too much trouble. There it goes. Not too bad. Now let's see if we can get the pipe to thread in. Yeah. All right. And that went back in. Looks pretty good. Now we're going to go ahead and try to stick this carburetor back on. I'll tell you what, before we do that, we need to address the fuel line issue. We got one fuel line missing, and we have the rest of them are hard and rigid. I think the new carburetor came with a new set of fuel lines, so let me pull that. Yeah, so the new carburetor that we ordered actually came with new fuel lines. So we're going to pop these out of here, and as long as this grommet is the right size, we'll be able to put these in and use these fuel lines. Oh yeah, look at that fuel line. All right, I'm actually going to take a couple minutes here off camera and clean out the fuel tank. It's a little bit dirty inside. It's got some old fuel line pieces in there. I'm going to clean that out a little bit, and then we'll come back and put that new fuel line in. All right, so with the fuel tank cleaned out, we're going to try to put this fuel line assembly in, and I have a feeling that this grommet is too small. And it is. This is not right. And the lines, in fact, are probably not long enough anyway. I mean, the carburetor is going to be way up here, and these lines have to make it up to the carburetor. So we might be able to extend the lines. Let me see if I can pull those out a little ways. What we're probably going to have to do is transfer those lines into this original grommet. Yeah. So I'm able to extend the lines. I think I can make the lines long enough if they were in the right grommet. So yeah, let's see if we can do that. Let's see if we can pull these lines out and put them in the original grommet. Well, the grommet's fine. It's just the lines that were bad. I'm gonna stick that line in there, this line in here, and this line in here. Yeah, so that wasn't too bad. All right, and now we're gonna try to stick the grommet back in the tank. And hopefully we're gonna be able to get those lines to stretch up to the carburetor where they need to be and still be long enough to work in the tank. All right. Let me see if I can figure out which one of these lines is the intake and which is the exhaust. So this line is the exit line and this is the intake line. And so when we put this on, this black line, it's going to go on the intake side, right there. And the other line is going to go on the exit side. And look, we do reach. So it's always kind of hit or miss with these aftermarket carburetors. Little things sometimes are not quite right, kind of like the throttle cable. But with a little work, most of the time you can make them work. Just have to be willing to do the work to figure out a way to make them work. All right, so let's go ahead and tighten this up. All right, and so then we need to get our throttle cable connected. Looks like it's almost too short. And so, like I said, when we talked about this during the disassembly phase, this little brass piece here has a large opening on one side and a small opening on the other side. One side's just big enough for the cable, and the other side is big enough for the button on the end of the cable. And right now this button is turned around backwards. So if we were to try to put the cable in this way, the button wouldn't go inside and it'd be stuck at nearly full throttle, I think. So we're gonna spin this 180 degrees, and then we're gonna drop our cable down. Try to anyway. definitely fighting us a little bit. Probably because it's borderline too short. All right, so the adjustment for the throttle cable is down here. And so we're gonna take this piece loose here and free up the cable so we can hopefully get it connected up there, and then we're gonna have to adjust it down here anyway. So let me get the right wrench to take that part. Actually, you know, all right, this one seems to be the right wrench. Right. So with that disconnected, we can pull our cable completely out of the housing, and that's going to give us a lot of slack to play with up top. Oh yeah, there we go. So now let's see if we can get this to go in. There we go. Yeah, that's it. So hopefully you can see now how the end of the throttle cable is slipped down inside that little brass fitting right there. If this had been spun the wrong way, that wouldn't have happened. All right, and so now we need to put our throttle cable back. And so we're looking for two things here. Hopefully you can see all of this. I'm going to make sure that we go full throttle when we go full throttle on the handle, and we do. That's full throttle. We want to make sure that we come all the way back to idle. And there's just a little bit of free travel in there. So I actually think that we're probably adjusted okay. That cable went into that fitting further than I thought it would. So we're going to go ahead and reattach the keeper on the throttle cable, and then we're going to be ready to fire this one up and see how it runs. All right, so that's new fuel lines, new carburetor with new primer bulb. We're going to put some gas in this, reset the camera, and let's see if this one will fire up. Okay, so with our new carburetor and our new fuel lines in place, we're going to see if we'll see if this one will start. We got the primer bulb pumped and the choke is on. Let's see what happens. Got a little pop out of it already. Didn't want to run off choke. Give it just a little throttle. New carburetor seems to have fixed the problem. Obviously somebody worked on that carburetor before and lost that small piece out of it. And so that carburetor never would have worked. The new carburetor seems to be working fine, needed just a little bit of adjustment. It was rich both on the low end and the top end. Leaned it out just a little bit. It seemed to pick up and sounds like it's running really good. So yeah, I think we're going to call this one fixed. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Check my playlist. There's other videos out there with a small engine repair. And yeah. Hope this encourages you to get out, maybe work on your own. They're not terribly difficult. Obviously on this one could have been difficult for somebody inexperienced to fix, perhaps, if you didn't know that that piece was missing. But I've seen that problem before, so I knew what to look for on this one, especially on those barrel style carburetors. They're the more finicky of the carburetors, I think, as opposed to the butterfly style carburetors. So you gotta sometimes have a little experience and know some things about those. But anyway, get out there and try. It doesn't cost anything to try, and maybe you'll fix your own and save yourself from having to buy a new one. So yeah, I think that's a wrap on this one. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned. We'll see you on the next one.